I think we'll be okay. I mean, like, I love that about this year, though, that you can have a bit more humanity behind all these things, you know. So it's really good. In any case, I can see that Rich has now pressed the live button, so we should possibly not be speaking about our dogs. In any case, I should start with the introduction, and folks can be joining as we go. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the first session of the Humans Come First Summit. You haven't missed an awful lot so far, just Rich and I introducing, and this is the first session in earnest, which is really, really exciting. And I'm truly delighted and just thrilled to bits that our first guest is the fabulous Annabel Venner. She's a new friend, but also someone whose warmth and determination really to help others is clear from the first moment you meet her. To give a brief bio, Annabel joined the specialist insurer Hiscox in 2009 to head up marketing in the UK before taking on the newly created global brand director role in 2012, at which point her objective was to help drive growth in key international markets. Before joining Hiscox, she spent 9 years at Coca-Cola, where she managed the My Coke rewards scheme. Now, sometimes you come across people like this in life, and Annabel is one of them, where their achievements just speak for themselves. So to speak very briefly about those, because there is a list as long as my arm, she's a fellow of the Marketing Society, and her work for Hiscox was also acknowledged as one of the pieces which was for the annual Brand of the Year award, alongside brands like John Lewis and British Airways. So this is the level that we're operating at, which is incredible. While doing my research on Annabel, one of the things that I found quite interesting and actually really encouraging was a quote which she attributes her success in the marketing sphere to a financial outlook on marketing. And this was primarily because she realized that it's not about us looking about marketing as a silo, but instead as an opportunity to be a driver for growth, which means that you have to learn to speak the language of everyone else on the board, which I really like, because it solves the problem of people saying people don't understand marketers. In fact, it flips it the other way around and says that we need to be understanding other people and speaking in their language. Today, Annabel's presenting on making a hero of your customers and celebrating the positive power of risk. Now, I don't know about you, but for a summit which is called Humans Come First, that strikes me as a pretty great title. So what we have here is an accomplished human being with a title to match. But one thing we haven't done is outline logistics, at which point I feel like I should be handing over to Rich.
Great. So you give me the sexy bit to do. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. I'm guessing that all of you have been on 1 or 2 Zoom webinars over the last few months. So this is going to be like second nature to most of you. But what we want you to do is, by all means, get involved in the chat, engage with people. But if you've got any questions that you have for Annabel, like throughout the talk, then stick them in the Q&A panel. So it'll be in, like, probably, depending how you've got your screen set up, it's probably down in the middle at the bottom. Click the Q&A button and put your questions in there, because what that allows us to do is to prioritize them and make sure that we don't miss any of the questions. And at various points, if it's a burning question, I can reach out to Annabel, and I'll let her know what's going on and what's being asked. And we'll also make sure that there's plenty of time at the end to have Q&A as well. Like, we are very excited to have Annabel here, and I think we're all going to learn a lot from her. So make sure you're engaging and asking those questions, because that's how you will get the most out of these sessions. Again, just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, AdRoll. Definitely go and check out adroll.com community. It's a community for marketers by marketers. And again, it's another resource where you can be learning a lot and engaging with the community around you. So go and check out adroll.com/community. And last but not least, before I let Annabel take it all away, is most of you would have just seen an email from me that talks about the Facebook group that we've just set up. So hand on heart, Joe and I hadn't even thought about doing anything like this, although the whole thing is about being human and conversations, but we left out the conversation bit. So very quickly, we've decided that we're going to pull together a Facebook group. And hands on heart, like, I hate Facebook as much as most people on this call, I'd imagine, but it's the quickest and easiest way for us all to connect and actually have decent conversations around this. And our hope is that people are engaging with that during the event, after the event, and we can all share stuff. I've just put out a post there, like, around the session I'm going to do with Dave Gerhardt. If you've got any questions you want me to ask him, I'll absolutely kind of roll those out. So get involved in that group, sign up. It should be in your email. If not, I will share a link. Just, well, tweet me or reach out to me and I'll make sure you get the link. Okay, cool. Over to you, Annabelle.
Right, okay, I will, right, let me just bring up my content. Hopefully this will work. Excellent. So good morning to everybody, and thank you for the very kind introduction from Joe and Richard. Just to give you a little bit more background, as Joe said, I spent 11 years working at Hiscox, which is an insurance company that predominantly sells business insurance to very small companies in the UK, Europe, and the US. And about 5 years ago, it bought a small insurer in Asia. So during my tenure at Hiscox, I spent 3 months out in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Thailand, which was fantastic. I left Hiscox in August, and now I'm spending a little bit of my time trying to work out what I want to do. So I'm participating in events such as this, and hopefully I'll continue to work with Joe. I'm looking at how I can support small companies that are just starting up, and I'm also doing a lot of mentoring. So I've also mentioned this to Joe. So I've been mentoring as part of the Marketing Academy program for the last few years, and I also mentored quite a lot of people at Hiscox. So I think it's really important, if you're starting out in your career, I would advise you to try and get a mentor. I think it can be really beneficial. You can have some really good discussions if you're facing challenges, either with personal development or with other people in the organization. So it's nice to see that there's lots of Hiscox customers out there, so that's great. So if anybody is interested, we'll find a way to get some messages to me, but I'm very happy to take on some additional mentors going forward. Right, so now I'm going to go into this presentation. So I joined Hiscox back in 2010, and it was a time where we had just effectively relaunched our marketing. And the focus of our marketing at that time was actually quite focused on our home insurance. And we'd launched this what I hoped was distinctive advertising, that was this black and red advertising using headlines and quite different probably images for an insurance company. And this is probably at a time where you would have seen lots of advertising, quite a lot of it price focused, or quite a lot of it talking about companies being there if, I don't know, your roof got a leak, or if you had an accident or were burgled. And so what we didn't have an issue with this time is people seeing our advertising and it being quite effective, particularly for home insurance. But what we wanted to do was to stop communicating to our sort of potential home insurance customers and start talking to what we called SMEs. So these are small businesses. And when we were sat there and going, right, how are we going to do this and what's going on? We realized at the time that a lot of people were doing what I would call very rational led advertising. So it was around, I don't know, talking about features and benefits of the insurance products, or talking about price. And what we decided to do was that actually let's try and connect emotionally with our business insurance. But when you think about business insurance in particular, you don't really tend to see very much emotional advertising. I think throughout my time in marketing, that the sort of what I would call sexier, more emotionally led advertising tends to be for sort of what I call fast moving consumer goods. So, you know, your Coca-Colas or your Pringles or your, you know, British Airways, they're the ads that are full of emotion. Whereas business insurance tends to be quite technical, quite product led. So we were sat there going, how are we going to do this? How are we going to develop some advertising that really connects with these guys emotionally? And the other challenge that we had was we had quite a premium positioning because of our home insurance background. And so even though we had this really distinct red and black advertising, to a lot of small business customers, it felt very distant and it didn't really feel like a brand that they could connect with. So we sort of sat there and went, right, how are we going to overcome this? And the first thing we wanted to do was, right, let's just go and really understand the landscape of how people are advertising to these small businesses. And when I talk about small businesses, I actually mean companies that probably have 1 to 10 people. So these are the very micro businesses. So the first thing we did was we sort of scanned the marketplace and said, right, what are people doing? And probably almost everybody was doing comms that featured a small business owner, either in their shop, looking at a laptop, doing some work on a phone. So if you sort of go Google small business customer, this is the type of image that comes up. You often get a florist in the shop. You often get somebody doing selling cakes or biscuits. And you often get somebody probably doing something with sort of carpentry. So this really did, you know, we knew that there was an opportunity here to go and do something very different. And then we decided, right, okay, we know everybody's using the same image. What is everybody doing in terms of what are they all talking about? And everybody was talking about risks. So everybody was saying, you know, as a small business, these are the risks you face. And it was about financial loss, or it was about, you know, if you on a contract and you don't deliver it, or it was if you have an employee, what happens if the employee steals from you, or if you have a customer that comes in and they trip and slip. You know, everybody was using all that language. And nobody really understood, I think, for these small business owners, what did it actually feel like running a small business? So rather than talking about the stuff that might happen, let us go and talk to these guys and find out what does it actually feel like to run a small business. And then once we'd gone out and spoken to them all, we then needed to find and develop this really emotional positioning that we could then take forward into our creative development, but also to use to engage the rest of the business. So I think Joe's already sort of covered this point. It's really, really important as marketeers that you just don't, when you engage with the rest of the business, talk about your comms or talk about the insight. You have to really engage them and you have to champion the customer. And therefore, you have to communicate what these customers want and then influence the organization to either change the product, change the way they do the service. So in the case of Hiscox, we would use the insight to go and talk to the operations team who ran our contact center up in York. We would use it to engage with the underwriters and say, why are we asking 15 questions when somebody wants to buy a product? Actually, we should only be asking 10. Or going to talk to the pricing team and going, why are we pricing it this way? This is way above what our customers are prepared to spend. So I think the reason I probably was so, I'd like to say successful at Hiscox was because I really understood the role of the marketeer is not just to do comms, it's not just to do content for the website or run PPC campaigns. It's to really, really engage with the broader business and really, you know, as I said, champion that customer. So we then spent a long time going out and talking to customers. And we did it in 2 ways. The first one was literally just go and chat to them. So chat to the small business owners. And then we did a second phase of work where we went and started to put some ideas in front of them and started to put in front of them some creative, and then understand how they responded to that. But also we looked at a lot of information we already have on our customers. So some historical information, and you will be surprised what you have in your business. And by the way, yes, I'm very happy to share these slides afterwards, by the way. So you will be surprised how much information you have on your customers. Often the challenge, I think, is getting it out of the business, but you really should look at historical information as well. And we were able to segment this by business type. So were they a management consultant? Were they an IT professional? Were they a coach? We were also able to look at it by the turnover of the business, how long they've been in the business for, and how many employees they had. So I would definitely say, yes, go out and talk to your customers, but also work with the teams to really understand what you've got. And you will end up with a massive information, which is what this slide is showing. And then your job as marketers is to make sense of that. So as I said, the first thing that we did was we went out and talked to small businesses, and we learned an awful lot about them. And the other thing that was fantastic was these small businesses were thrilled to have an insurance company talking to them. So I think that a lot of the time, these sort of micro small businesses feel quite ignored. They feel that businesses don't really want them. And they feel that also people don't really understand that they're all very different. And these are just a few of the things that we learned. There is this inordinate sense of pride in their business and that they set it up. And a lot of them have set up business for a number of reasons. One of them could be they got fed up of working in a big corporate environment. They got fed up of other people telling them what they wanted to do, and they wanted to be in charge of their own destiny. A lot of them might have been that they had to do it for a better work-life balance. And some of them would have done it because of sort of redundancy. So I think it's going to be quite interesting this year to see whether following this year of challenging year for a lot of businesses, whether you get a lot more people finding the courage to set off on their own. The other thing was a lot of people really admire small businesses who go and set up. And this word bravery came out a huge amount. So when we were doing this research, this was back probably in 2012, 2013. And a lot of people then felt that it was quite risky to set up at the time. They were also described themselves as, being leaders. A lot of what we heard was, I really don't want to work for anybody else now. I just want to work for myself. And, here am I, looking at setting up my own business. And actually after however many years, 25 years in the industry, for me, I've decided I want to set up on my own. And some of what we found then is what I'm feeling at the moment. They also feel that other small business owners, they don't find themselves competing against. There's this big sense of camaraderie. So all of this came out, and you start to learn that actually these small business owners are just like us. So often I get very frustrated when people talk about B2B marketing is really different to B2C marketing, and I go, it's not. We're all human beings. We all like brands that understand us, like brands that get us. And I think that this is what we found here amongst these small business owners. They were very emotional, and they had this great sense of passion, and they really wanted brands to understand what they were about and engage them in a very, very interesting way. So we had all these emotional ones, and then you get all the sort of more, what I would call sort of more practical ones. So, for a lot of these businesses, they were working very, very hard, and they were working long hours. However, they didn't resent that because they were masters of their own destiny. And there was a sense that they were putting in these long hours and it was hard work, but actually this translated in direct financial success for them. They also had a sense of sort of everything. They couldn't leave their business at sort of 6 o'clock or at the weekends. It was always on their mind. And it was a sort of 24/7, but again, they didn't resent that. And then they also had this sense of you become you have to master lots of different skills. And this is what I'm finding at the moment. So I'm having to set up, you know, a limited company. I'm having to understand how tax is going to work differently, what I can expense, what I can't. I'm having to become an IT professional when things don't work. So it's really interesting that you can't just focus on your area of specialism. You have to master all these different skills. And so what we wanted to do then was go, right, we've learned a huge amount about these small business owners, and we've got this wealth of information inside the company. How do we then turn that into a really, really interesting platform? And if you go back to some of my earlier charts, I talked about everybody else out there was talking about the risk and the challenges and almost the negativity that these small business owners would face. And we decided to sort of turn that on its head a bit and go, right, well, actually, for these guys, risk is good. And that became a really interesting platform that felt very personal, felt like a really strong insight, and felt like it would really connect with these small business owners as human beings and as consumers. And it's also a very credible space. If you think about it, if you think about what an insurer does, effectively, we take a punt, we take a risk on somebody. So when you insure somebody, you ask lots of questions, and you're trying to work out so if you think about car insurance, you're trying to understand, you know, what type of driver are they? Where do they live? Is their car parked in the right place? Are they likely to have an accident or not? And what you're trying to do is insure the people that are good risks. So this platform was great because it gave us that credibility as an insurance company, but we also was something that we knew would be really compelling to our target market. So you've got this very, very common platform. So it was now, right, so how do we take that and how do we turn that into really strong communication that will be distinctive, but really strongly emotionally connect with this target audience? Now, Risk is Good was our sort of internal platform idea. It wasn't something we were going to externalize. So if you think of some of the creative briefs that you might write, there is often in there which talks about what is that insight, and therefore what is the message, and then often your advertising idea will then translate that and come back with, right, this is the tagline. And this is the tagline that our ad agency, that was VCCP at the time, came up with, which was the small and the brave. And this was fantastic because this really encapsulated, one, who we were talking to, which was small businesses, but also their mindset in terms of how they viewed themselves, which was they were the brave ones. They were the ones who are leaving corporate life. They were setting out on their own. They were having to make all sorts of decisions. And they were having to master lots of skills. And we just loved this idea when this was presented back to us. And we just thought it was just a fantastic way of connecting with our small business audience. So by now we've done a lot of the sort of what I would call hard grunt work. We had analysed all the information we had ourselves. We'd spent a lot of time with our target audience. We'd taken all of that data. We developed this Risk is Good platform. We had crafted a creative brief. And again, please take time when you're there and you are crafting a creative brief. You should spend hours on doing this. This is vitally, vitally important. An ad agency can only respond to your creative brief, and you need to put that thought and that thinking time into it. So we'd given that creative brief to our creative agency and given them time, and they had come back with this articulation of Risk is Good as being the small and the brave. So we now went into creative work, and we then went back to the small business audience to see what they would think of it. So I'm now just going to take you through, for many of you, you might not have seen this work because, as I said, it was sort of 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm just going to take you through some of the creative work that went out and how people responded to it in the initial qual and quant research that we did. So this was one of the first ads that we went out with, which was called First Invoice. So what people said to the work was it absolutely nailed in terms of warmth and empathy. So people just went, even though we were still using those quite stark red and black colours, people said, oh my God, you absolutely get that. You get us, you understand what these first moments are like. And I think First Invoice was a particularly strong one. That moment when you've done you've got your first client and you send the first invoice off. So it felt very, very personal rather than being from a big corporate company. And it felt like we were talking to them on a one-to-one level rather than being patronizing and talking down to them. And I think part of it was the tone that the creative agency came up with. So, you know, as it says in here, it felt like there was this huge amount of respect and admiration for small businesses. And it felt like that we also really understood them and really valued them. So this was one of the things that we knew would be a challenge, and we were thrilled to see how people responded to the work. This was one of the second ones that went out. So this was, you know, we've covered that first point of when you write your first invoice, and this was around when you hire your first person. So we were really keen that, as you can see through all this work, all this work is about the customers. There's actually not that much here that talks about Hiscox at all. So this campaign was very much a sort of brand focused campaign that I'm talking through. There's lots of other activation that we did that was to drive people to our website and our call center. But this was really, really focused on really positioning us as the insurer that really understood these small businesses. So this, again, all the work, what they really liked was the simplicity of the language. It wasn't overly complicated. It referenced, again, I spoke about this, risk, but in a very, very positive way. And again, it was very flattering to them and made them feel very special about what they wanted to do and why they're set up in life. So again, all of this work was a real sense of making heroes of these small businesses and making them feel very special. And I love the quote at the bottom here, which was around, you know, you're so used to banks turning you away. And I'm sure this probably would have applied to other financial services companies beyond banks. And it just made them feel special, and it made them feel very, very wanted. So this was another one in the first series that we went out. So this was sort of very much talking about, you know, it's not about the size, so reference to the small business, but it's about the appetite, which talked to their ambition. So here, what we found in this early work was it sort of challenged the perception of Hiscox. So when I first started this, I talked about that through the work that we'd done previously, people knew Hiscox, but they thought that we were probably a very premium insurer. They probably would have thought that we were quite distant and not very warm, and also probably not really for them. So this really helped change the perception of us and absolutely put us front and center as being the insurer for these small businesses. It made people feel that we, as I said, really, really understood them. Now, when we were developing this campaign, as I said before, it was very, very important that we engaged the whole business. And this point here, which is positive associations of Hiscox as a brand that understands me, is really, really important. And we spent a lot of time working with the staff in the contact center, because we didn't want, when people phoned up, for them to read from a completely generic script about insurance. So we spent a lot of time really talking to the guys on the phones and helping them understand how these small businesses feel, and also give them some sort of information on, you know, the different challenges that an IT consultant might face from somebody who works in marketing or somebody who's a coach or somebody that's a trainer, because the aim of it was people see our marketing and go, wow, there's a brand that really understands me. They then call us and they go, wow, that person on the phone really understands me. If you don't have that connection, you will go out there and you will spend a load of money. You can have some fantastic marketing that everybody thinks is wonderful. But if they then call you up or go on your website and they don't get that same feeling, you have just wasted so much money. So this is where I said it's really, really important that you work across the whole organization. And some other ways that we changed this here was for our core professions, we would have specific wording, and the wording would say on it, you know, talk about a policy for an IT consultant or talk about a policy for a marketing consultant. And then we had this sort of big group who what we were called miscellaneous, and they would get just generic policy wording. But what we did, we worked very hard with the teams to say, okay, of this sort of miscellaneous group, what are the next 3 biggest groups in there? And then we developed some specific wording for those 3 groups. So again, they would get their policy wording, and forgive me, I can't remember what they were, but it might have said, you know, coach on it. So again, they get wording and they go, wow, that says what I am. So that brand understands me. And we also then had to look at, again, as I said, what our underwriting questions look like, and also what our policies should look like. So we can, you know, we would then work with the underwriting teams to say, actually, all of these small businesses feel very different, and they are very different. So what they need is policies that they can tailor. They don't just need a generic one-size-fits-all policy. They need ones that they can change the limits on or decide what they want included or what they don't want included. I'm just going to quickly actually pull up some of this these Q&As as I'm sort of halfway through. So there's one here from Chris who asked about what research methodologies did we use. So what we did here was we did what I would call fairly standard qual when we were doing the communications development, but when we were doing the first stage, we did breakfast meetings. So what we did was we went to sort of some key locations, and working with the research agency, we invited a lot of small business owners to have breakfast with us. And I cannot remember what time we did it, but it would have been early enough that they could then get back to their normal day jobs. And that was immensely popular. And it was quite interesting because it was quite a relaxed environment. We would have, you'd have a couple of people who were running the conversation around the table. We might have had sort of 8 small business owners, and then we'd have had a couple of people from Hiscox. And we would always try and invite along somebody who wasn't from the marketing department to attend. So that worked very, very well for us. I'm going to cover off so Dave asked here about lead time from concept creation to going to market. I would have said probably from writing the creative brief to the agency, giving them some time to respond, then doing qual, and then finalizing the ads. It probably would have been about 4 or 5 months to get those ads out there. I'll come to the rest of the questions a bit later. So this is another one that went out in the first tranche, which was called Boardroom. So what we learned here was we did put lots of ads into this first round of qual, and we learned a huge amount about what worked and what didn't work. And to be honest, there was a lot that didn't work. So some of it was around what we discovered. So we talked about these guys are on 24/7. They know they put in lots of hard work, but the reward is worth it. If you focus too much on the negatives, that doesn't work for them. They don't want to be reminded of the tough times. They want you to really focus on celebrating the good times that they have. So that was one of the very, very key learnings. And also we wanted the ones that work best are this this first line here, where you were very respectful and very full of admiration for these small business owners. So this goes back to, you know, that line that really encapsulates it, which is about being small and the brave. And the early work really focused on those sort of milestones that they reached. So writing your first invoice, hiring your first employee. There was one that celebrated when you move into your first office, so move out of working from home, or having a desk in the corner of a room, which is what I have at the moment, to maybe going and renting out some space. So those work very, 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 very well. And even for established businesses who may have been around for about 5 or 6 years, they remember those early days. You know, they remember those days when they first set up. They remember the good and the bad times, but they wanted us to focus on the good times. And the other bit that was really important was this, we were speaking to them in quite a sort of informal way, but quite witty and clever. And then it felt very, very personal to them. And we had great fun with some of the later work. I'm not going to take you all through it, but if you go and search just probably Small and the Brave on Google, you'll see that the whole range of work that we came out with. This was one of my favorites. We had a lot of internal debate about whether we run this or not. But it worked. There was a few people who didn't like it, a few of our customers who didn't like it. But actually, I think for most of the people we researched it with, is yes, they all acknowledged they had hard times, and there was times when you know, they might have lost a client, or they were struggling to get an invoice paid, or some competitor had done something terrible to them. But they really just understood this one, and it was done in the right tone, so it worked very, very well for them. So this is what I sort of reflected on a bit earlier, which was, and this is why Stuffed worked in the end, which is, you know, everybody talked about the really hard times and the really negative issues that they'd had, but they didn't really want us to talk about it unless we could spin it on with a positive angle or a sort of positive resolution. So, and the other thing was, don't talk about where people had failed, because that's not very motivating to anybody at all. And again, this one plays, it's a bit like the Stuffed Bear, in terms of it acknowledges people have had hard times, but actually, you know, it can make you stronger, and it can make those businesses survive more. But one of the very, very interesting things we learned was, we often researched 2 bits of creative side by side. You'd have one like this, where, as you can see, there's absolutely no product information at all. And then we had other ones that we ran where we had supporting points underneath. And what we very quickly learned was, actually, you don't need lots of product information underneath these. These were working really, really well. They were engaging because we weren't using corporate language. The main things that they were taking out was, Hiscox is a brand like me. It really understands me. It gets the challenges that I face. Therefore, the jump they made was, well, therefore their policies are going to be very good. The policies are going to be tailored to me. They're going to have this very personalized approach. So we didn't have to have lots and lots and lots of copy underneath, which is fantastic when you're doing outdoor. The rule of thumb I was always told at when I was at Coca-Cola, so going back to this one, was one logo, as big as you can possibly make it, one image, and no more than 6 words. So even here, you know, there was 10 words. And if you start putting more and more copy on it, people are not going to read it anyway, and you end up just an ad that loses its impact. So we were thrilled that these ads were working very hard without the need of lots and lots of copy underneath it. Obviously, if you take this into press, you can put more copy because you have higher dwell time, but really think about your outdoor, and really think about, put yourself in the shoes of your customers in terms of, how long are they going to look at it for? How much are they going to take out? And if they're not going to read it, don't put it on. And you might have this massive internal battle, because we had this, where people are going, oh, but we know this will be really interesting, but it just messes up your creative and you'll lose the impact of it. So the other thing was take the work and make it work across multiple touch points. Don't just come up with outdoor or radio campaign, make it work really, really hard. So we took it in lots of different areas. We had a small business blog that we developed that had loads of really useful information on there, both from staff within the business. So we made a lot of our internal teams feel very special because we got them to write pieces. We also spoke to a lot of external people. You can see bits here, which are guides for going freelance or guides if you're setting up your own business. And we would then take this information and put it out through our social channels. We did some events, which we'd never done before. So the image in the bottom left here is we did some work up in Media City in Manchester, which was fantastic. So we gave away some free coffee and really brought to life the small and the brave, and spoke a lot to all the small businesses on that area on our social feeds, and we really engaged them and got to make them heroes. So we featured a lot of those small businesses on our social media feeds, and you can see a bit of that happening on the bottom right hand side. So when you're thinking about your campaign, think about all those touch points. You've got the ones that you have to pay for, you've got your own channels, but you've also got PR, and you will find that a lot of your customers are very, very, very happy to be engaged in what you're doing because you make them feel very special. And the other thing, this is nearly my last chart, and then I'll go back to some Q&As, is, the scope of my work was for our business insurance was UK, Europe, and US. And when you get an insight that is really powerful, it can travel to different markets. And you might have all these different business units that go, well, we're special, we're different, we're French, and the French are different to the Germans, and we're different to the Americans. But actually, a powerful insight can travel, and what will be different is the way you execute it and the way you bring it to life. So these are just some examples of work that was done in our US business. So they again focused on their tagline over there was encourage courage. And they brought it to life in lots of different ways. They did some work with, I think it was with Forbes, where they did a piece of work that was called the American Courage Index, that talked about how courageous was America anymore. And how courageous, does it need to be going forward? They did some podcasts where they talked to their customers, and they did some very, very impactful press ads as well. So there's one in the bottom right-hand corner, which they ran on International Women's Day that was very, very praised for and it talked about women being courageous and women being strong and women being very key to the success of small businesses. So I'm just going to go back now to some of the other questions I've got here. So one from Chris again, which was around metrics used to measure the success of the brand campaign. We used quite a few, and we set those right at the start. So we would track what we called our ABCD metrics, and that's awareness, brand affinity, consideration, and decision to purchase. Another top tip for you, calling them ABCD makes it really easy to understand, from an underwriter to your finance director to your CEO. And consistency of metrics and communicating it on a regular basis really, really works. So we tracked shifts in those. We also looked at how often people were searching on Hiscox. We looked at key statements to do with our brand. So as well as tracking those ABCD, there were some key brand statements that we'd look at to see how people viewed their relationship for Hiscox and what they thought we were good at. So one of them would have been specialists in small business insurance. And then we would have some core acquisition targets in there. So we would have some metrics with regards to sales and quotes. And I think it's really important that you get that blend of brand metrics and acquisition metrics. The other thing that was very good, which we didn't have as a success metric to begin with, was we also saw retention to go up as well. Okay, so Louise asked about small and brave prices. We didn't change our pricing whilst we were running this campaign. We weren't premium priced for SMEs. We priced very similar to our competitors as well. But one thing that Hiscox never did was doing price promotions. So you would never find us doing anything like, 12 months for the price of 9. But what we did was we did a lot of partnering with organizations where we could offer them discounts. So we would partner with, I'm just trying to remember which ones, so like an accountancy firm, so they could offer their clients a small business discount. So that's how we would do our pricing. Okay, one from Alan about buy-in from the customer-facing members of the team. I'm assuming this is about buy-in on the communication. We engaged them right from the start. So I'd said one thing that was very good about the marketing teams at Hiscox was there was a lot of engagement very, very early on, and a lot of sharing of information. And as I said, when we did research, we would invite non-marketers to meet our customers. We would run debrief sessions and not just invite the marketeers to it. And when we had developed the creative brief for the agency, we would then sign that off to the organisation. So I think it wasn't a hard task to get buy-in. It was just engaging them from start to finish rather than just presenting them with work at the end of it. Right, well, I've got one more, which was about what is the main thing I want to achieve in the future. I've been working for far too long now, and I've decided that I want to go and do some good in whatever career I've got left. And I'm talking to lots of startups or small businesses that are trying to solve issues or solve pain points for customers and do some good. And I'd love to spend the next few years doing project work or consulting work and going helping them out. But also I really strongly believe in developing people. So this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. I love mentoring people. I learn a lot from people, I think, and if I can help them on their way, I can. I'm involved with, I go out and talk to schools as well and try and give tips to students, talking about what I think they need to do to make them successful or get the job that they want, but also trying to encourage them to go into marketing as well. It's fascinating talking to sort of 15, 16-year-olds. They have no idea what marketing is as a career. They also have no idea about how much it costs to make an ad. It's fascinating that they believe you can make a TV ad for sort of £10,000, I think. So that's what I want to do. I say that I'm sort of dabbling at the moment, but I'm just having fun and I'm enjoying all the conversations that I'm having. Right, I think that is my last chart. So I'm going to stop sharing and happy to take, I think I've answered most of the questions, but I'm happy to just scroll through.
Absolutely.
If anybody's got anything else.
I can do you a favour here, Annabelle.
Okay.
So first of all, I don't know whether my screen was visible at the time, but if it wasn't, then you wouldn't have been able to see me nodding along like another insurance dog. I think that was amazing, and so I speak as someone who probably fits in the bracket of folks you were trying to speak to, and hopefully you were able to see the comments coming through as well, where people are like saying this has nailed it, and I think there's just something really quite wonderful there about a company, a marketing department, whatever you want to call it, who's taken the time to do the bit that all of us say we do, but very few of us actually do, which is the research and understanding the customer.
Yeah.
And it was really quite amazing to see with that insight how easy it was to get that messaging out afterwards, and how that flowed so nicely. So,
Yeah.
you know, you certainly don't need the validation from me, but I just think it was an absolutely beautifully executed piece of marketing, and also your notes on the final question there as well, you know, actually made me, you know, just think of you as a person too. So, you know, thank you so much for that. There's a question here that has come through in the Facebook group as well, which is very simply, they say, I love the small and the brave positioning. Other than the performance of the campaign, so internally metrics, did you ever get any feedback from the rest of the insurance industry? Because they recall at the time it was really disruptive. And
yeah, a lot of Hiscox advertising is very much held up as being best in class, which is fantastic. And it was lovely to work on it. And I think, you know, it's very flattering when you hear that. And I think we just at the time just thought, wow, we've just absolutely, you know, nailed something here. And it was a very special moment to be working on it. And I think part of what was down to the success was, so, you know, I talked about some of this before, which was around, you know, take the time to take the time to understand your audience, write a great brief, have agencies that are partners. You know, we worked with VCCP for probably 7 years, you know, 8 years, and they felt like a real partner. It felt like we were vested in them and they were vested in us. Don't try not to do what everybody else is doing. We always spoke about being we're in it, but not of it. You know, yes, we're in insurance and there's certain things that you have to do, but actually, if you understand your audience and really get them, you can do stuff that is not non-traditional and still build your brand and drive acquisition. And I think finally, we had a really diverse team at Hiscox. So we didn't just hire from the industry or hire from financial services. We wanted people that, you know, you have this expression sometimes called up to something. Those people that, you know, could take ideas, were prepared to challenge, were prepared to look at things a bit differently. And that's what we were looking for, rather than somebody who had 5 years working for one of our competitors. You know, what would they, you know, you question yourself and you go, well, what are they going to bring that's going to be different?
I love that. And you've mentioned it a couple of times actually about the creative brief as well.
Yeah.
So do you have any sort of like big wins or big fails over the course of time where, you know, on the creative brief process where you've been like, I'm definitely not doing that again, or I definitely am doing that again?
What do you mean in terms of advertising that we've developed, or just the whole process?
The process of developing the creative brief. There'll be a bunch of people who no doubt work here with agencies. But that creative brief being an important part of it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also, so we had our own internal creative brief, and it was 1 page. You know, I can't remember what the expression is, which is something about a tight brief or something. So try and be really succinct. Don't throw the kitchen sink at it. Try and aim to do 1 or 2 things. You can't expect work to do, you know, a shopping list of things. Because it's just not going to. You need to be really, really succinct, and you need to give agency time to respond to it. You know, I'm just trying to think where stuff's gone wrong is where you put yourself under huge time pressure and you try and write a brief and get it out in a couple of days. So ours is quite a collaborative process, and, you know, write the brief and then give yourself a bit of time to reflect on it and give it back to the agency. And then also what agencies do is they turn your creative brief into an internal brief, right? I don't know how many people know that, but they do. Make sure you see that. So you will be dealing with people, they will have their own format for the brief that they give to their creatives. So if you have sight of that, you then understand, have they understood what the challenge was?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that happens in everyone. It's happened in all the agencies that I've worked with. So just ask them to share it with you before they give it to the creative brief. And then finally, I'd say,
that's a credible piece of insight.
And then finally, just make certain that everybody in the organisation has sort of knows what you're going to do. There have been occasions during my whole career where work has been, you're burning money with the agency, And then you realise actually you haven't got alignment within the company to go and do this bit of work, and then you've just spent your time and the agency time and money developing stuff that's never going to run.
Amazing. That's unbelievably interesting. Rich, as an agency, is that something that you do as well? Do you?
Yeah, so we've got internal briefing documents and mechanisms that we use where we normally we've got client-facing ones where we ask, where we're articulating the issue that they need, and then obviously that translates back in. But it's never really occurred to me to have the client then kind of reconfirm our internal briefing documents. I think it's a great piece of insight.
Absolutely, spot on. Well, that's the questions from me. Rich, do you have any at all?
I don't have any more questions other than just to say thanks, Annabelle. That was a great way to start the summit. And you can't see any of this, but like I've been trying to manage the social interactions and at the same time and listen. And it's like we've had loads and loads of people either asking questions or just saying how great the talk is and how much it's resonating with a lot of people. So a lot of people in the comments within the Zoom window are just talking about how in the current climate they're setting up their own business, and like all of this stuff is really resonating for them. So like thank you for kicking off the summit.
That's right. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, honestly, I'm busy, as I said, busy networking, busy meeting lots of people. I've got time to help. So if anybody sits there and goes, reach out to me on LinkedIn, drop me a note, and I can't promise you I can be able to spend days and days on it, but if it's a quick thing where I can help, then let me know.
Annabelle, if you're on Facebook and you're happy to jump in the group, because there's a few people, I put up a post saying if anybody wants us to connect them with you, then to reach out via us and we'll connect you. But if you're happy to jump in the group, there are people who are very keen to speak to you.
Perfect. Okay, no problem to do that. Well, best of luck, everybody, for the rest of the 2 days.
Thanks for joining us, Annabelle.
Okay, no problem.
Cheers. Take care.
Bye.